and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 184. Today is the Still Life Challenge. So last week I talked in depth about the notion of still life as a genre, how it's come out of the artistic tradition through painting, going back centuries if not millennia, and how it translates into modern photography, and how it's pretty much both the most simple and the most difficult of all genres of photography. Simple as in it's just you and a bunch of objects in front of you that you decide to arrange. You don't have to worry about the hassle of the weather, you don't have to worry about the hassle of other people or creatures or anything moving out the way. You have complete control. But that in turn also makes it one of the most difficult because there's nowhere to hide. It's entirely up to you as to whether it works or fails. So we've had several people send in various images, and so we're going to be looking through those. So we're live. If you're watching, leave a comment and we'll make a start. So yes, welcome. So like I say, here we are, the Still Life Challenge. But yes, here we are live on YouTube. If you happen to be watching live, then make sure you leave a comment. Tell me where you are, where you're from, who you are, what the weather's doing, all the usual kind of chat. I can see we've got people in already. The chat's going. If you've not joined us before in the chat, then they're a friendly bunch. They won't bite to join us in. If you happen to be watching the recorded version, because everything is recorded here on the YouTube channel, there's 183 previous episodes for you to go and check out if ever you want. You can also leave comments on there. Sometimes, or most of the time, YouTube tells me that there's a comment being left, so I can always find out a little bit more. So let's take a little look at the comments. We've got April says, greetings from a sunny and cold Long Island, New York. Viji says, good evening friends, a breezy and cloudy evening from India. Meg says, hello everyone. Susan says, hello everyone from a cloudy/sunny/cloudy/showery sort of day in Kubri. Nadia says, hi everyone from Fife. Stacy says, good morning all, cold winter day, a bit sunny in Hatboro, Pennsylvania, getting ready for work. April says, oh, it's a good one, Stacy. Sandra says, hi everyone from a sunny Birmingham. Andy says it's hello from a sunny and wet Hertfordshire. Janet says hello from a chilly Mississauga with some snow on the ground. Inge has joined us saying hi from Oslo. Stacy says, thank you from April. Okay. John says, hello all, we have a little snow here in Midwest Ohio. And then there's bits of chat going on. Marilyn says, hi everyone from a sunny, cold Colorado. Oh, and Rosemary joins us from the Pacific Northwest. Well, this is good. Now today we've actually got a little bit of sunshine out the window, and for the first time in several months I'm attempting to go with natural daylight coming from the window from this side rather than a light that I've been having over there for the last few months to kind of light me up, because usually at this time, you know, what has been happening is it's either been getting dark too early, or it's just been so overcast and so dull there's not been enough light coming from the window. So today kind of marks the first real day of spring as such, if it means that I can actually just pull the blinds up and use the natural light for these podcasts. Right, what are we going to do? So yes, I'll do a quick update on the notion of Smug Points. So one of the things we started this year is the notion of the Smug Points and Smug Awards, and so we've been accumulating, and where are we at? So we just scroll up here and we find that currently in February, until this episode is over, Marilyn is in the lead here with 60 points. Janet has 35 and April also has 35. But there's also a kind of a quarterly running total as well, and at the end of the quarter, the one who's had the most, we're going to dedicate a podcast specifically for that person, so they can put in several images and we can talk through whatever aspects of photography they particularly want to deal with. And currently in the lead there, Janet is in the lead with that one with 115 Smug Points. April is running second with 100, and Viji and Marilyn are running tied third currently in 90. So all to play for. Now, in today's challenge, everybody who enters gets 10 points for having entered. Anybody who's here live and leaves a comment will get another 5 points. And I'll be picking my top 3 as well for bonus 30, 20 and 10 points, and maybe 1 or 2 extra little kind of bonus points as well if I see fit at the time. So that's all of kind of fun of the Smug Points. So what are we going to do? Still life. Last week I talked in depth about the notion of still life, particularly artistic still life, the history, where it's come from, the tradition of still life and what it's about. And the main thing about still life is that it is the potential here to really show off and hone the skills of the photographer. Now, still life, in essence, is a collection of objects, inanimate objects, arranged in a compelling way. Inanimate can also include flowers, but it's, generally speaking, we're talking about things as opposed to people or animals, really. And so it's arranged in a compelling way. So you have a bunch of things and then you kind of arrange them in such a way that it creates a level of interest. Your eye moves through the photo, so it's a chance to really use compositional techniques of colour, leading lines, shape, line, form, flow, bracketing, echoes, symmetry, asymmetry, rule of thirds. There's all sorts of different ways you can go about it. And how you combine these. And it's the ultimate thing of the fact that you don't have to worry about the animal moving out of shot, you don't have to worry about the weather changing, you don't have to worry about somebody sitting getting bored while you're trying to photograph them. It's all under your control. So that's kind of what still life is, and particularly artistic still life. What the artistic still life is not, and here we come into the point whereby there's been several slightly different interpretations submitted for this challenge, and this is kind of it makes me think that perhaps I didn't explain well enough what I was really trying to get across, because there's been a few submissions which I would say don't really fit the brief or haven't fully understood what still life is really about, particularly this notion of everything I was trying to get across, which is it's about you and about your skill as a photographer, and your skill with composition, not just recognizing what's there but actually creating the situation. I see Robert's joined us, says howdy all from a cold North Texas. Now, so what still life is not, is it's not product photography. Now, there is definite overlap. In a way, product photography is a form of still life, but it's got a different emphasis. And I'm going to come back to that because there are 1 or 2 people who've put in images which are much more about product photography than they are still life, and so I will talk a little bit more about the difference there. What still life is not is found as is, as in you stumbled across something and you thought, oh, that looks quite good, and you took a photo of it. The artistic still life that we've been talking about, that everything I was talking about last week, was about the photographer arranging the items. So if you've gone in and you've said, okay, I want to move that and shuffle that about and all the rest of it and take a look and get the lines and everything that you want, that's what the skill of artistic still life is about. Not, I came across somebody else who's already arranged this and then I took the photo. Now there's a couple of examples of that as well. And also, still life is not all about the editing techniques. Now that's not to say you can't edit. Absolutely, you can edit. You probably even should edit. But when the edit becomes the feature rather than the still life being the feature, you've again missed the point. And there are a couple of examples where really the entry is about the editing feature rather than about the layout and skill and composition and light and all the rest of it of the photographer. As such, there's a level at which there will be, generally speaking with these challenges, what I try to do is I say, well, look, we're not going to be doing critique, we're not going to be doing feedback. It's about people sharing their entries, and then we can all look at what everybody else has done and become inspired to go away and try these things ourselves. And absolutely, that all still applies, except for the fact that some of the entries, if everybody watching goes away with the impression that that's what a still life is when it isn't, I'm not doing you any favours. So, all these caveats in mind, let's make a start. Let's make a start on the Still Life Challenge. And I will try and get the most out of this. I'm not going to be cruel to anybody, but I will have to point out where briefs haven't been met and why they haven't been met. And everything I say, the intention is to help you grow as a photographer. It's not about upsetting, humiliating, doing down anybody. If you haven't done what I was asking you to do, then either I haven't communicated it properly, or you just haven't understood what I meant. If you haven't understood what you meant, it means I didn't communicate it in a way that you could understand. It's not so. This isn't about pointing the finger at anybody and saying they are less than. It's about my lack of communication to really get across the points I was trying to get across. So by correcting that, hopefully, at the end of this podcast, everybody goes away with a much better sense of what still life, or particularly artistic still life, is really all about. Okay, you with me? Let's begin. Have I lost everybody? No, I don't seem to have lost anybody yet. Right, okay. So, let me start with one more quote, and I may come back to this later, but it's something I came across this week, and I thought this is really interesting. In some ways it's really obvious, but it's worth saying because it does suddenly make you think, which is photography is not about what something looks like. It's about what something looks like as a photograph. That's what photography is. And it's a really important distinction because sometimes I think a lot of people, especially those who don't do photography, think of photography as just a way of capturing a likeness. That what you're doing is it's about the thing you photograph, but it's not. It's about what the thing looks like as a photo. And so you as a photographer are using this tool to interpret and create an image of what this thing is as a photo. And that's a really important part. And I think the reason I bring it up is because I think in still life, this is a really important thing to remember, that it's how you create what's in front of you. Right, okay, let's make a start. So what I'm going to do then is I need to make a start. Let's just start with one which is what I consider to be a good start to a still life. And here we have Stacy. So Stacy has sent in this one and says, this is for the Still Life Challenge. I did not use a lot of items for this shot. I saw this urn and decided a single flower would suffice. And in a way, really, what Stacy's done here is a good classic still life shot. We have a vase, urn, in this case metallic, so it's got reflections, it's got texture, it's got light, and then there's a flower which is has different kind of texture. And not just that, but there's been a bit of thought to the background as well. So we've got, looks like a kind of a green cloth in the background and a kind of dark brown and golden yellowy cloth underneath. So we now actually have, there's a colour palette. There's a colour palette of this sort of golden yellow, the greens, the browns, and all in all, it really works rather well. Now, the biggest problem here, Stacy, is I think resolution. There are elements to this whereby it looks I don't quite know what you've done with the editing, but it does feel like it's been overcooked slightly in the editing. I don't know what the original was like, but partly the way things have gone, it does look slightly more painterly in that sense, partly because of sort of smudged detail, and that which sometimes comes from low resolution and slightly over editing, depending on how it goes. It sort of smudges things a little bit. It does make it look a little bit more like paint, in fact. So, but as a kind of composition, as a colour balance, as an idea of taking couple of objects, it doesn't have to be big and complex and wild, fairly simplistic, not simplistic, that's the wrong word, fairly simple. It's idea, then it works. And so I thought that was a good one to start with. That's one where I really feel that what Stacy has done here has taken on board what's being talked about and created something out of it. So smug points to you there, or well done there, Stacy. So what have we got here? Yeah, a couple of comments have come in. April says nice colours, very classic looking. Viji says gold, green background, beautiful flower. Susan says lovely tone, Stacy. April's wanting to know what your form of editing you used. Marie's joined us from South Africa, says hi all, sorry I'm late. Rosemary says I like the painterly feel, Stacy, and John says I like Stacy's shot Renaissance style. Okay, so next up then, what I'm going to do is we will move on to Inge from Norway. And Inge has gone for a very different kind of, also using flowers, very different kind of feel to this one. And so where are we? So Inge says, I have some quite traditional still life photos of fruits, but I thought I would like to submit another kind. This is a still life to be if this still life is to be considered still life. Well, yes, I think it does. It fits under that idea of a collection of objects, or inanimate, in this case, you've got the flowers, you've got the vase or bottle or jug or something there. You've also gone for a sort of soft reflected surface as well, which so we've got echoes kind of coming up. And there's a kind of pleasing symmetry to it, and that purple and green is quite a kind of, again, a pleasing colour palette as well. So again, as still life goes, it's a good one. It's a kind of nice classic idea of what a still life can be. So nicely done there, Inge. Excuse me. So April says the reflection is creative, a gentle photo. Marilyn says I love the reflection. Stacy says I love the reflection and colour scheme. Viji says tulips, I think. Yes, yeah, they're definitely tulips. And reflection. Sandra says beautiful tulips. April says, what is the form called? The look. The form, the call. Not quite sure what you mean, but there's a kind of symmetry basically there, with a reflected below. And Nadia says lovely reflection, great shot. Rosemary says very calming, very pretty, Inge, and John says nice composition. Okay, let's move on then. So our next one is Meg. And so Meg decided she would have a go at, so she says, I was trying out my own still life with some of my bangles on my stand for the challenge, with side light coming from the window in the living room. So Meg's got this little stand for her bangles, and she's placed them all on, and then placed it in the window downstairs in our living room. There's some little kind of painted wood background, and the light is coming in from the side. So it's full of texture, full of colour, and lots of different objects in there. So, a kind of fun way of finding something and then manipulating it, putting it in place, and thinking carefully about where the light's coming from and how it's going to be perceived. So, yeah, quite a fun one there, Meg. So, yeah, thank you for sending that one in too. And we have April says, oh no, where are we? Oh yeah, so Inge says thanks everyone. April says, Meg, I like your heart bracelet. Viji says, what a collection, colourful. Nadia says, very pretty, Meg. Marilyn says, very fun. And Sandra says, great selection of bracelets, nicely in focus. Right, now next up we've got John from Ohio. Said, I took a bunch of shots for this project earlier today. And when I went to download them, I had a memory card failure. So I grabbed a shot from my archives. So let me show you John's shot from his archives, is this one. So what we have here is an anvil, pickaxe, sledgehammer of some kind, lots of metal, lots of rust. What I don't know with this is whether this is from John's own shed, say, where he's arranged the items, or whether it was somewhere he went to visit and he sort of saw the items already there and then took an opportunistic shot. But then John goes on to say, and then about an hour later or so, I got another shot through, another email from John saying, after reformatting my memory card, I took 3 quick shots of what I was trying to get earlier today. I adjusted the exposure lighting and cropped it. I wish I had the earlier shots. And then what John sent was this one. So this was the, if you like, the official one that came in of these little statuettes of horses. It could be Clydesdale horses. So we've got 3 and what looks like some kind of big cup or stein or mug of some kind in the background. Now, with this one, it's sort of, yes, it's a collection of objects, but in the sense of creating compositional techniques, use of light, use of form, texture, line, leading lines, all this kind of stuff, it doesn't really work. And I think the problem here is, I know this with other photos that you send in, John, that you've got much more of an eye for seeing what's there. So in the landscape, you get a sense of how the light is falling, how the shape of things coming. I think when it's come to arranging things, the light here is straight on. It's not interesting. We don't have a side light. We don't have a backlight. The objects are all kind of laid straight in a line. Your angle is just sort of looking slightly down at them rather than... If you were going to take something like this, taking them from a lower angle, taking them from above, having different kind of lighting, the backdrop with this is very textured and catching light in such a way that it almost creates a very noisy background. So it becomes, when I see this, what I get a feeling of is you thinking, I'm trying something which is great, but you're feeling completely out of your depth and you're not sure really what it is you're doing. And that's a kind of a tricky place to be. I appreciate you having a go, but I also know that you were struggling with this. So it's a difficult one. So in a way, you're kind of better off sending this one in. This one has more interest. We've got strong diagonals, we've got rich texture, there's of the rust, there's the colour palette, if you like, the browns, the different shades. As a photo, this one tends to work much better. The only real question with this one, I think, is back to the bit of whether you arranged it, in which case, if you did, that's great, that's you playing with still life. If you happen to stumble across it, and somebody else has sorted it out, then it's less in the word escapes me, but the spirit of, if you like, still life, which is about you taking control of the elements. So tricky one here, John. Not entirely sure how to help with it. I think with some of these things, it's really a case of we need to kind of get almost one-on-one and sit and play together with these things to really work out the best way to move forward with that. But certainly of the 2 photos, I think this is actually the stronger one than the one of the items sitting on the cloth. But I absolutely appreciate you going for it and really kind of give it a go. Well, okay, comments here. April says, I'd love to see these horses in real life. John says, I agree with your assessment. The shot was too rushed. Viji says, like the collection, the horses in the jug. John says, the anvil shot was slightly adjusted. Oh, okay, extra smug points, or good smug points for you there, then, because, yes, that's what you need. If you've played around with things, then I think that's part of it. And sometimes you can do that with a still life. There's a collection that's there and you know something isn't quite right, and if you just move this a bit here and you move that a bit there, then it works, and which is kind of what you would be doing anyway, you know. And this is what I mean, is that a good still life photo, an attempt at photography, you know, playing with it, is, it's not to say that you get it right first time. This is the whole point, is that you do your setup, you go click, you then look in the camera, or you look at, you know, your screen, and you say, well, does that look right? Would this look better? Okay, what can I do to adjust it? Do I need to nudge this? Can I bring in a diagonal? Does it look like the whole thing is moving out of the picture? How can I get it to kind of curve back in? And keep going, click, adjust, click, adjust, click, adjust, click, adjust. And you keep doing that until you get to a point whereby either you realize it's not going to work and you abandon it and you try something else, or you get to a point where you go, actually, you know what, this is finally working. And you have an eye, John. You have an eye for composition. I mean, I remember that picture you put in a few weeks ago of the mill and the river and everything else. Really beautifully composed. So there's chunks you understand. So I think it's a case of, with still life, this is a place where you need to try and, it's transferable skills. Bring in the skills that you've got elsewhere, an understanding of composition, and then applying it to what's in front of you. Okay. April says, I love that anvil shot. Would be better in a landscape. Well, it might be. You could certainly get well, two different ways you can talk about that. Are you talking about landscape format, or are you talking about outside in a landscape? I took that to mean outside in a landscape. It all depends. Sometimes the texture of the wood behind is quite interesting too. Would have been an entirely different shot if you'd also done it in landscape format. Oh yes, April says landscape format is what she meant. Okay. All right, let's move on then. So after John, we come to Robert. Oh, where have I? No, hold on a sec. I've just closed that. So let's go to Robert. Now, Robert says, here is my still life photo. I took it in an antique store in McKinney, Texas on the Dallas Camera Club field trip. I find that antique stores are a great place to shoot still life. There are lots of interesting exhibits that are displayed in a pleasing and eye-catching manner. Sometimes I can hide the price tags, and others have to be erased with Photoshop. Now, so this comes back then to what I was saying earlier, which is, so there's elements of still life. Yes, it's a collection of inanimate objects, and as a photo, I think this works quite well. We've got that whole kind of sense. You've got the actual photos themselves. You've got nicely in focus, where it goes out of focus into some bottles and vintagey kind of style things in the background. The rusty kind of box that it's sitting in the foreground. So that all works well. The question, though, is really about, if you like, the authenticity of artistic still life, which is how much involvement did you have in this, rather than it becoming a kind of an accidental, stumbled across, found setup. So now, if you're putting this into photo crowd, guru shots, viewbug kind of competition, nobody's ever going to know. Nobody knows. Nobody's judging on it. They're just judging on, does it look like a still life? Does it? Yes, it's got all the elements here. But in terms of everything I was talking about last week, which is still life as a way of really honing your skills as a photographer through composition and light, and you arranging it. You see, this is the really key point that I'm trying to get across here, that maybe I just didn't get across strongly enough last week. I mean, I went through all the little bit of showing you how I'd arranged the fruit on the table, or the coffee cup and the beans and the little espresso pot. And part of that was because I'd arranged it, I just automatically assumed that everybody got that. But it's not just about, and it is about this notion of you actually arranging it. That's the point of still life. It's the practice point. It's the point whereby you really get the chance to go, okay, I've got these little objects here. What can I do with these objects to make them look interesting? How can I arrange them? And by physically moving these objects about, changing the lighting, changing the angle of the camera, changing the depth of focus, playing with these things, this is where you really hone your skills, because it's by the actual doing do you go, click, that worked, or click, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Okay, let's take this and move that sideways a bit. Click, that works a little bit better, but now that bit seems imbalanced. Okay, let's move that. Click, oh, that bit of light, I don't like the way that shadow's falling. Let's move that. Click again. And it's the action of doing, it's the action of constantly making these little adjustments, either big adjustments or micro adjustments, which is where it really hones your skill. So that's what ultimately the still life challenge was about. It's not so much about the end product, although the end product is of course important, but what I was hoping was that you would kind of really get in and try and do this. So it's a tricky one here. I mean, again, I don't know the extent to it. I mean, if this was in, so when you go into an antique shop, there might be lots of brilliant things to take photos of. I mean, without a doubt, I was doing something very similar recently. I was photographing in an artist studio, all these artists and makers, and they have loads of little bottles of inks and paints, which they've made themselves. Part of what they do is they go out and forage and they find rocks and minerals and plants, and then they make their own paints and inks, and then they make up little bottles and and I was having loads of fun just kind of going around the studio taking these fun little shots. And they're fun little shots and they're really quite interesting, but they're not my still life. They are me recognizing the opportunity to photograph something else that somebody else has put there. Now it's then my interpretation, and that's fine, and I will take credit for what I think is a reasonable photo. But I wouldn't turn around and say that it was a still life in the way that I'd done a still life last week, which is where I'd actually personally arranged all the items. Now, if you take the items and you personally arrange them, that's you really getting involved in this practice to hone your skills as a photographer, rather than the opportunist bit, which is seeing something else. So I hope that all makes sense. But I mean, nicely found, without a doubt, and nicely taken of what you found as well. So I hope that all makes sense. Thank you for sending it in. Where are we? Okay. Stacy says, I love old photos. Marilyn says, wonderful old photos. Sandra says, lovely old photos. Marilyn says, I love antique shops as well. They do have good potential shots, cool old photos. Viji says, vintage collection of photos, screams nostalgia. Robert says, I had to arrange the photos. I should have mentioned that. This box had a lot of pictures in it, so I picked the best ones and arranged them myself. Okay, excellent then, Robert. That's good. That's what I wanted to hear. Excellent. Viji says, even if they're not our family pics, you did arrange, that's lovely. Marilyn says, it was so fun to play with the objects and click adjust. Oh, good. I'm glad you're enjoying that, Marilyn. Rosemarie says, I wonder if a less busy background would let us zero in on the pictures. Well, there's that side of it, but I would also say what Robert has done here is he's gone for a shallow depth of field so that at the very least the background is slightly blurrier. So it's not grabbing quite such an amount of attention. He's also used the vignetting to kind of darken down. So, I mean, if you had taken that box of photos and put it against a plain background, say, or just a neutral wall, sort of maybe slightly textured wall or something like that, that could have been interesting too. But I would say, given the circumstances that you were in, and there's only so much that the antique shop owner is going to let you do for the sake of a photograph, especially if you're not planning on buying the box of photos, that I think you've taken the right approach in your post-processing, in your editing style. Okay, let's move on then. So, yes, Jack. Brilliant. I've got to show you this. Now, Jack sent this photo, not actually as his primary one, but to show where essentially what he says, where it had gone wrong. My failure on these is so funny, but at the same time, a learning experience. So some of you may remember last week, Jack asked a question about how do you make sure that you're not in the picture when you're photographing something with a very reflective surface. And I was talking a bit about wearing black and maybe shooting from behind a curtain, and Susan came in and said set your timer or have a remote release so you can be standing out of the picture when you go click. Anyway, interesting bits of conversation, interesting ideas for solutions. This then tells us all about it, because here we have this whole collection of glass balls or domes and little beads and loads of reflective surfaces, except that when we zoom in, what we can see here completely in this reflective surface is we can see Jack holding up a big reflector and we can see car in the background, house in the background, all through. So he's taking this, and so actually this reflected the scene, which has included him holding up the reflector. Yes, it is funny, but I also think there's something beautifully wonderful about it. I love this photo. I absolutely love this photo, precisely because of the fact that you can see the camera. It is funny. It has got everything about a photographer trying to get it. It puts a smile on my face. In fact, the only thing that I feel like could really improve this is the one thing I would have said is really that if you could have done a narrower aperture, and so if this, because it's sharp here on this level, but the pattern behind goes out, and the glass beads in front aren't quite in focus. And actually, I think what I think this would work really well if you had something like maybe an f13 or something like that, maybe f16, and so everything had been sharp from front to back. That would have just lifted it the extra bit. But it makes me laugh, and I like the arrangement as well. This is well done. You've got the small pieces in the front, then they get slightly larger, and then you've got the bigger one at the back. And these reflecting balls are reflecting and reflecting back. So the back of these are reflecting into the front of those, which is also catching the reflection of what's going out. I really like it. I think you were definitely onto something. What John then did, though, was he said, so he only posted that as an example of what he essentially said what went wrong. So, sorry, Jack. So Jack then said, so instead, what he, as his actual one, he sent this one, which was, these were outside a restaurant and just said to me, comfy spot. I could not have arranged them better. But actually, Jack, I much prefer your first one, where you did arrange them. This then also falls into exactly what we've been chatting to about Robert, although Robert did adjust the things, and talking to John about the notion of the anvil, which is actually how much have you adjusted it yourself. If you haven't adjusted this, if you've happened to have walked past a display where somebody else has put the pile of cushions, yes, it's an interesting capture. Yes, there's a place for this kind of photo, but it's not actually you having taken the time to create the composition. So this one doesn't interest me anything like as much as this one. This one, I just absolutely adore it. So something to keep in mind there, Jack, that actually this one is much more still life, and it has, and it is including, it's a collection of objects arranged in an interesting way, in a compelling way. So yeah, this one I think actually ticks many more of the boxes than a bunch of cushions. So interesting thoughts there, but thank you very much for sending both of those. That was Jack. What have we got? April says, he's having a laugh with Jack, says, I did not realise that till Kim panned in. Stacy says, I like this, the reflections are amusing. Marilyn says, love it. Sandra says, I like it. Inge says, cool. Susan says, that put a smile on my face too, Jack. Viji says, hey, this brought a smile and I enjoyed this click. April says, definitely creative. Meg says, spectacular photo, Jack, because I really like the reflections. Sandra says, I like the first photo best. And Viji also says, I like your first submission 100% more than the cushions. So there you go, Jack. You see, not just me, you were definitely onto something there. Right, so thank you for sending that in. So next up, we're going to look at April. And April sent in this one. So April said, I used a black velvet blanket and I put on the which I put on the card table. The light was from the ceiling light above and 2 windows for natural light. I staged many aspects of the Valentine's Day symbolism. Red rose for love, pink admiration, and yellow for friendship. Heart jewellery, candy and wine. I also thought a heart crystal would add to the symbolism, looking for some reflection, as well as heart-shaped tea light and some petals. So this is the approach for this is a great one. So the idea, so it's a collection of inanimate objects, except for the fact that, but there's a theme, there's a running theme throughout. It's not just a random collection, there's been thought about the collection and how they're going to be put together. And then, now, but in terms of composition, I think there's maybe different ways you could play with the line and light. There's, I can see that you've got all the different aspects and you've kind of sort of set about arranging them. What I feel is lacking slightly is a sense of flow. What you really want with something like this is a sense of to be able to kind of come in and move through the photo. And So in terms of that, I think that's maybe worth playing with if you're going to do something like this again. Is to think, yes, you've got all the bits and pieces, and yes, you've kind of arranged them. And I can see how you've kind of gone with sort of the colour, placing the yellow here in the middle, along with the tea light, gives you a splash of colour here. And there's sort of different kind of balances around, but I think the notion of movement is really the one that you want. The other thing I'm slightly less sure about is the chopping off the top of the bottle at the back. It's a tricky one here because actually if you'd given the space to the bottle, you would have ended up with large amount of black area at the top, which would have imbalanced the photo. But by bringing it down, you've cut the top off the bottle, and so I'm not sure, it might have been worth trying to think about again about a slightly different arrangement, that if you were going to have the bottle in it, how else might you have been able to do it and arrange the pieces so that you could also play around with the flow. So I think with something like this, April, I think you've got all the elements and you've got a really good start to this. I think this, what it really comes down to is playing around a little bit more just to see if you can get that flow, and to make sure, I think because the top of the bottle's cut off, you just become kind of aware of the top of the bottle being cut off because nothing else is cut off. It's not like a fill the frame thing like we were talking about a few weeks ago, where you essentially everything would be cropped in at the side. So something to keep in mind, but other than that, nice and colourful, taking on board this idea of a collection of things to put together. So Sandra says, lovely Valentine, still alive. Marilyn says, lovely. Viji says, all the things that I love, April. Stacy says, I love the whole Valentine's theme. Viji also says, bottle I felt feels like it's been cut and would like to see the rest of it too. Rosemary says, wonderful celebration of Valentine's, April. You definitely put a lot of thought into this image. John says, very seasonal, well done. And Stacy says, I agree with Rose, definitely well thought out. Okay, excellent. Right, next up then, similarly, Marilyn then. So Marilyn has said, this is for the Still Life Challenge. I used window light from the side. I then went through a number of compositions before settling on this one. Afterwards, I looked up the symbolism, and the books and glasses represent knowledge and evidently status from years ago. The clock is time passing with the frailty of life, and of course the money and money box is wealth. It was certainly a lot of fun on a bleak winter day. So yeah, this is fun, and so Marilyn has gone at this with exactly what I would hope. Similarly to April here, taken a collection of objects and then sort of played around with lots of different compositions with them, using a natural window light from the side. Looks like, so we've got a kind of pale light coming in from the left here. Does look like there's a bit of yellow light, could have been overhead light or something coming from the top as well. What I would say, interestingly though, I mean, you looked up the symbolism and placed the symbolism on afterwards. I think it's always more fun if you want to go for symbolism is to try and work out your symbolism first and then weave it into the picture rather than kind of sort of accidentally stumble. Lovely that you accidentally stumble across it, but something to keep in mind is think, well, okay, if I wanted to do something, how would what stories could I tell with symbolism? Would I want to introduce something which hints at a particular kind of flower, or the way that that maybe the money is sitting in a money purse, but the money purse is spilt and the money is tumbling out of it, which maybe means something's different than a collection of coins in their own right. So there's ways of playing with this. Other thing with this one, I think similarly to what I said with April, is there's a certain sense of trying to get a flow here. It sort of feels like you've got the book here and the book standing up here, and it's okay, but I don't feel I don't feel like my eye is drawn in and then led through in quite the same way. I don't know what other compositions you tried. I might also be tempted to have something like the clock and the book and the glasses more central, and then having books around them. You could have gone for a slightly kind of symmetrical-ish way of doing it, or to even have books tilted over, or one book the other side. Feels slightly to me like, especially because of the way it looks like you've used a wide angle lens. So, and there's a sort of slight kind of tilt to the image here. So by the time we get to the clock, if we look at the verticals, they are really quite tilted over. And so there's a little sort of sense of wanting to straighten. If you maybe had books on the other, it feels like the clock is about to fall out the side of the picture. really, I suppose is what I'm saying. But I think the idea is good. I think, and I'm delighted you had fun with it, because that's exactly what I wanted you to have. And as you say, on a wet day, when a bleak winter's day or whatever, it's something you can do at home, and you can do it again and again and again, and you can chop and you can change, and there's no however long you spend with it is however long you want to spend with it, and you can chop and change, and you're not having to worry about somebody else's timeline or agenda or impatience, unless you happen to be using the kitchen table and the whole family's wanting to sit down to dinner. But you know what I mean, you can sort of set up your own little corner. So that's great there, Marilyn. I'm kind of really glad that you had the fun doing that. What have we got? Oh, April says, I love this shot. Sandra says, lovely still life. Nadia says, I love this shot. Sandra says, great old books. Susan says, great image, Marilyn, with lovely lighting. Marilyn says, yes, it was an overhead light. Stacy says, I like this idea with the books, very creative. I do one with books, they show up well. Inge says, very nice lighting in the open book. Well, that's open there with the glasses on it. John says, I like this idea, Marilyn. Viji says, good one, a nice lighting. Rosemary says, Marilyn, this is very pretty. It's just the kind of image that would come to mind when I think still life. I would love to see what a bit more side light would do. April says, I thought this shot looked very professional. Marie says, this is a nice shot for me. Love the collection of books. I feel the middle of the photo kind of creates a triangle. And Marilyn says, thanks so much, everyone. And yes, lots of fun. Excellent. Okay. Well, just a quick reminder then, everyone, that if you are finding these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Also, a quick little reminder, if you haven't done already, make sure you subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Click like as well on the video if you don't mind. Certainly YouTube always prefers the algorithm. The algorithms always like it when you kind of click like, and which means it might pop up in somebody else's feed at some point. we live in hope. What we're trying to do ideally is grow this wonderful community of ours, get more people on board. So again, if you happen to know anybody else who you think would be interested, do let them know. Okay, so what we'll do now is we will move on to Janet. Now, Janet sent in this one. It says, here is my submission for still life. I did have a couple of other ideas to try to add more elements, but was not able to try those in time to submit. Okay, so Janet sent in this one. We've got grapes, we've got wine on a red background. Green grapes on the red background. Looks like it might be white wine, which of course is yellowish. Now, I think here, the idea of grapes and wine, classic combination. The main thing we're trying to do, and I also will say I like the way the grapes kind of tumble out the bowl and curve round and what have you. Although they kind of curve away from the glasses, and I wonder if you'd actually have them curving to kind of include the glasses and kind of created something a little bit more kind of contained as such, might have worked slightly better with the composition. But of course, the obvious thing with this is the colour, is that red is screaming red at us. And the green of the grapes then actually ends up enhancing that red even more. And the yellow of the white wine is lost because the red is so strong. I think this is one of those cases where the red has just become so overpowering that it becomes sort of almost the only thing you really notice with this. Now, it has to be said, on some of the online sites where people are skimming through very fast, this amount of red might actually help people grab people's attention for a quick like. But I think in terms of spending time with this on your screen, looking at it, after a while, it does fry the eyeballs a little bit. So when but in a way it moves on. One of the interesting suggestions that April has come up with, actually I will just say, is worth mentioning at this point, that in the Facebook group, last week I was asking for suggestions for podcast ideas, and April has actually suggested the idea of actually background colours. do you always have to shoot against black and white? What do different background colours do, and how might they actually affect your picture? And so to maybe do a podcast on that. So I think I think it's a good idea, and I think I may well take up that one. I'm not sure exactly when I will do it, but it's certainly there ticking away in the back of my head. And I think that this picture by Janet becomes an example of that. That bright red is probably too overpowering. But what difference would it make if that had been blue, or a dark blue, or it had been a duller red, or it had been brown, or it had been green, or any other colour, and also lighter and darker tones? How would that have affected the outcome of the picture? And I think that's a really interesting idea. So we'll maybe pursue that. So actually, to also remind everybody that like I say, in Facebook, I put up a thing there asking for suggestions. So if you have any more suggestions, if you have other ideas you would like to see the podcast, I've already had some great suggestions already in there. We've got about 7 or 8 in there. Go to the Facebook group, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Scroll down a little bit, you'll find the bit that's asking for suggestions. Put your ideas in there. Take a look at what other people have put as well. If there's anything you agree with, click like on there, so I know that if there's particular ideas that more people are interested in, I can maybe prioritize those, or even write extra comments saying that you would like, that you agree with this, or you have a variation on that you would be interested in. So that would be really useful. And if you're not on Facebook, but you have some ideas of things that you would like me to do podcasts about, then email me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. Let me know what ideas you would like to see in a podcast. Okay, whether that's genre, whether that's compositional, lighting, title ideas, things that crop up on these camera club or online competitions where you always feel like, well, okay, I see these titles, I put these pictures in, never really get quite a good response, don't feel I fully understand what they mean by this, or how can I improve on this particular subgenre or title idea, then let me know. These podcasts are for you. These podcasts, it's all about helping you to improve your photography. I'm making my guesses all the time at what I think you might need help with, but if you can tell me directly what you need help with, it allows me to hone these podcasts much more to what you need. So hopefully that all makes sense. Right, what have we got here? So hang on a sec, I'm slightly lost with so yeah, comments on Marilyn are okay, and okay, so yes, on to Janet's. April says, great shot for a green and red only contest. Sandra says, excellent contrasting colours. Marilyn says, beautiful, Janet. Janet says, it's actually ginger ale since I don't drink. Okay, ginger ale instead of white wine. But I still think there's a problem with the colour coming through. John says, nice one, Janet. Great colour choice. Viji says, classic bit, the red bit, wicked beautiful. Meg says, I really like the bright colours of red and green together. April says, thank you, Kim. I want to learn more about that. Okay, so despite all my comments, everybody else seems to prefer your red and green. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I still stand by the idea that I think. Yes, for scrolling through for competitions, like, you know, if there's a red and green competition, that would work really well. But I think when you're sort of spending any time with it, the red is too strong. So I think we'll have more fun kind of exploring the idea of other colours. Right, okay. Oh, Susan thinks a ginger ale is a brilliant idea. Yes, I think it probably is. Right. Okay, so let's move on then. So next up we have Sandra. And Sandra sent in this one, said, I did do some experimenting with lighting using a single subject. I wanted to see if I could use a light box covered in tissue paper to backlight a perfume bottle and then use additional side lighting to light the bottle from the front. I was quite pleased with the backlighting, but the side lighting you can see in the bottle. So, so what we've got is we've got the Dior perfume, we've got the tissue paper that the Dior perfume came with, placed over a softbox to create an effect here. Now, she's talking about side lighting. We can see the reflection in the bottle, but I don't think that's necessarily problematic. That's just adding texture and to the sense of the three-dimensionality of the bottle. There's a kind of a goldish light here, and we've got a kind of more silver light here as well. So I think the lighting works. I think the concept is good. Where we sort of slightly, where it becomes sort of potentially problematic with this is what I said back at the beginning, which is actually what this really is this as a product shot. As a product shot showing off Dior rather than necessarily being still life. And this is a complicated one. And, you know, this isn't to detract from what you've done. I think what you've done is created an interesting photo here, coming at it with creative mind and way of doing this. Still life is generally, and certainly the kind of artistic still life that we were the genre that we were talking about coming through the painting tradition that we were discussing last week, is the notion of a kind of a collection of objects, that it's more than just a single object. I think when you're in the sort of single object realm, it's more kind of product photography or portrait, you know, it's like portraiture or portrait, you know, it's almost like a portrait of a bottle as such. It's about the single object, whereas still life tends to be about the collection. It's about the objects and how the objects relate to each other, and how, you know, so which allows you that notion of flow, of you know, line form, composition, that sense of movement through the picture. This is product photography really, but it does overlap with still life. So I mean, I can see where you're coming from, and you know, I think you're using all the techniques. I really like the techniques you've used, but I think it's just worth flagging that up, because again, it's what I sort of said at the top of this program, which was we can look at photos and we can go, that's a good photo, and I like that photo, and maybe that inspires me to go out and take a photo similar in my own way. But if I go away from this podcast thinking that this is a good example of a still life photo, then I've kind of gone off with the wrong impression. So I have to, at this point, say that, yeah, it's sort of still life, but what it really is its product. It's a good example of product photography. And product photography, in a way, is a sort of subgenre of still life. But if we're talking about the notion of the artistic still life tradition, of which I was talking about last week, then we're sort of slightly off topic. But I fully accept the fact that it's it's not necessarily an easy one to call, but I kind of needed to point it out. So I hope that makes sense. So okay, what have we got here? Oh, Janet's asking maybe something darker to look like red wine, with the previous one. And Inge also says that I like the composition, but the red was a bit overwhelming for me too. Okay, April says, oh, this is a good idea, Sandra, with the tissue paper over the softbox. Stacy says, by the way, I love the grapes and the wine. The perfume is a good concept. Rosemary says, I think of still life telling a story, conveying a message. This is a lovely product shot. That makes me want to try out a sample of Dior. Susan says, I like the side light on the bottle, Sandra, especially on the lid. It just glows. Great idea to use the tissue on the light box. And Viji says, love the lighting, the colour. I think this qualifies for still life as well as brilliant. Yes, a vase or a rose or a box of chocolates would have made a difference for that artistic touch. And yes, I think really, yes, it's that point with still life. If you put in a couple of other elements, then that would have, you know, in a way, a bit like April was with, you know, saying, you know, here are elements of the Valentine's Day thing. So yeah, anyway, something to toy around with, play with. But yeah, it's a well taken photo. But thank you for that one, Sandra. Okay, let's move on then, and we're going to move to Nadia, and I put this because we're kind of in similar territory with Nadia here as well. So Nadia says, because of health issues, I've been unable to get my camera out to take a new picture. Well, I hope those get resolved soon, Nadia. So this is one from my archive. So what we have then is we have a bottle and wine glass. A bottle, and Again, what I tend to it feels to me it is more kind of product in that sense. It's very clean. It's still life. It is still life. We have a collection. We have a couple of objects. They are related. The glass looks very large compared to the bottle. I think, by the look of this, the glass is in front of the bottle, and so that will, because it's two-dimensional and we don't get a sense of depth of vision, we have no idea, unless we look at that bit at the bottom, whether it's a small glass further in front or even a larger glass further behind. We tend to have a sense of what we think a glass size of a glass is and the size of a bottle of wine, and these don't feel like they quite match up to me. The glass feels too, it's either a very small bottle of wine or it's a very large glass, and without any other context it's difficult to know. Having said that, I mean, I like the lighting. I like the way you've lit it. I think the notion of the two lights coming from the side are exactly what you needed for this. With the bottle here, a sort of slightly bluish tint on here and a sort of slightly yellower tint on here. And in it, so this two lots of side light help to give it a really kind of three-dimensional feel to it, and it does feel, but again, it feels very producty. I can, kind of imagine, your black gap up here is just where you put the writing to, relax with an apothic red on a Friday evening, or whatever you want to say. The winemaker's blend, rich and smooth. So it's got that kind of feel for it. So yeah, I think this is again that sort of very slightly borderline, but very nicely executed. So yeah, thanks for sending that one in, Nadia. Where are we? Susan says, love the simple colour palette here, Nadia. Sandra says, beautiful lighting and interesting wine bottle. Stacey says, this is very nice, clean. I love the background. Maybe fill the glass with wine. And I think, yes, that's definitely an idea there, that if there'd been some wine in the glass as well, to connect it. April says, another background colour would make it inviting, but the bottle is very interesting. Marilyn says, love the lighting and the reflections are well done. Rosemary says, lovely lighting, Nadia. Marie says, the glass to the front, glass is too large in front. Maybe use a smaller glass or further back from behind the bottle, but other than that, it's a good shot. And Viji says, a nice crisp pick. Okay, excellent. Let's move on then. So I wanted to show, next I'm going to go to Catherine. So Catherine, hold on, where is that? There we go. So Catherine had said this one and said, I don't do a lot of still life because I don't have much imagination. I took this photo the other day. I made cookies the day I made these cookies and made tea for my daughter. The idea came to me in my kitchen as if it was obvious. I put 2 old cutting boards as decoration and arranged my objects as best as I could. The light is natural without flash, taken with my Canon 90mm lens. A light treatment with Lightroom, and here is the result. But my art in still life photography stops there. Well, actually though, Catherine, I really like this. I think this is a good classic still life. It side lit. You've got using the boards, the chopping boards or cutting boards for the base and the background, give you that really nice wooden texture. The cookies, along with the teacups and the kettle. It works. I think it works really well. In terms of composition, you've got you don't have everything exactly side by side. You've got the cups curve up from the left and then come round to the kettle. The kettle, importantly, the spout is pointing back into the photo, so it brings you back in. If you're coming in from the left, the eye gets drawn around here, and then the cookies kind of bring you in here. So there's a nice kind of curl and containment and sense to the arrangement here. So I think, whether still life is something that you usually do or you don't do, this one I think has worked well. I think you've got the idea of it. It goes, for my taste, it's gone a little bit too dark, maybe over in the top right, perhaps slightly lightened up in this corner. But it does feel sort of, the whole thing just feels slightly too dark. But that at this point, this is about sort of subtle bits of editing rather than the overall concept. The concept is good, cookies and a cuppa, you know, what's not to love about that combination. I like all the crumbs. I like the layout. I think this is a really good way of, a good example of a good kind of artistic still life, using a collection of inanimate objects, all of which are related, create a theme, and arranged in such a way that your eye is drawn through and round the picture without being obviously thrown out of one side or another. So, yeah, really nice one there, Catherine. Thanks very much for sending that one in. Where are we? So April says, really creative idea. Marilyn says, nice, love the colours and lighting. Nadia says, thanks everyone. Marie says, this is lovely, dark and moody, love this. Viji says, wow. Sandra says, wonderful texture and great teapot. Stacy says, I love those teapots and cookies, very well done. Inge says, really like the composition and the lighting. Susan says, great composition and super lighting. Viji says, earthy tones and love the teapot, cookies and cups. Rosemary says, you've accomplished some really good movement and story. Nice. Viji says, perfect shot. John says, I give this one Smug Points. Well done, Catherine. Nadia says, really like the flow in this one. Meg says, the cookies add a really nice touch to this photo. Viji says, having my dinner and watching, yet craving for those cookies. Could you send some my way? Jack says, wow, late but made it. Oh, welcome, Jack. I'm afraid I've already talked about your one earlier in the podcast. So once we get to the end of this one, go back and take another look. Right, okay. So lots of approval there for you, Catherine. So next up then, we're going to go to Marie. Now, Marie has sent in this one, Still Life Challenge, duplicated the image and rotated to make an exact duplicate. So fun here with the notion of wine glasses, candles in the wine glasses, and then placed on a reflective surface, so you're getting the reflection. Now, what Marie has done here as well, though, is that she has taken the image and duplicated the image and then flipped it to create an exact mirror copy, flicking left to right. So we've already got an a sort of semi kind of, from the reflection in the glass underneath the actual glasses, we've got the reflection, and then it's duplicated again. So, fun idea. I like where you're coming from. In terms of composition, it feels very, very, very close to the top here. I would have liked a little bit more room to breathe around it. I think there's other ways, and maybe you could have even done a kind of a landscape option on this. However, there is a slight problem here, which is, I would say, we're running kind of into a problem here where the editing is detracting from the content. The fact is, when we look at this, we know that this has been mirror flipped. So we've created a mirror, we've split it. This bit here is leaning into that bit. This isn't 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 glasses. This is 5 glasses chopped and reversed and put there. Now that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that in itself. And it's created an interesting effect. When it comes to the notion, though, of the still life and the artistic still life and the looking at the picture, is what I feel is that the attention, first and foremost, is on the editing technique you've used. It's less about the actual content, the actual items, objects, the way you've placed them, the way you've lit them, the way you've arranged them. The very first thing I notice is that this is a flipped image. And so my first point of attention is the editing. Now, sometimes that's called for. I mean, I've seen on Photo Crowd, periodically, they will do something where they talk about a mirror image, where they expect you to cut something in half, flip the other side, and create something suitably abstract. I've even entered things like that myself, where I've taken a leaf with a bit of twig, flipped it and suddenly it looks like a kind of creature, and it's an interesting effect. But for the still life, what happens is this moves it away from the still life genre and into an edited thing. Even though it is still life, the point that I'm really trying to make is where your attention goes. And mentally, the attention goes straight into the fact that this is the editing technique has become the dominant part of this photo. And that's fine in some things. It's just, again, it's that thing. It's not that I'm necessarily saying there isn't a place for this, but it's what I'm needing viewers to understand is that if we're coming out of the tradition of artistic still life, then what you're wanting is for people, like in the picture with the last picture with the cookies and the cups and the kettle, or the teapot rather, is to have a sense of the collection, and you're looking at the content and how that content is laid out, rather than thinking necessarily about the editing technique. Once you start noticing the editing technique, at that point you've moved away from what it is you're actually trying to show off. It's a little bit like when you watch a TV program and or a film or something, and the editing isn't quite right, and so maybe the mouth doesn't line up with the sound, or somebody slams a door and the whole wall wobbles, and so you realise that it's a set, it's not actually the room that it's supposed to be. For a moment, what happens is you pop out of it, you stop suspending your disbelief, you're no longer involved in the movie or the TV program, you suddenly become aware that you're sitting there watching a movie or a TV program. You're not in it, you're aware of observing it. And it's the same kind of thing with this, that as soon as I see the edit, if that's the first thing I see, then it means that that's what I'm looking at. And if the competition calls for that, then that's great. In a case of this kind of artistic still life, I feel that the notion of that edit detracts. So it's something to keep in mind of, if you are doing editing techniques, are they then detracting from what it is you're trying to show? And it's all then a case of where you place the image. So I hope that makes sense. So thanks for sending that in and for giving me the opportunity to point that out. Where are we? So April says cool reflections. Sandra says dynamic and very effective. Robert says great idea for a photo. Viji says technique is astounding and dramatic image. Susan says very clever, great idea. Viji says room to breathe, as Kim would say. Yes, I think I did mention that one. Meg says I like the reflection of the glasses. And Marie says thanks all. Marie says I get what you tell me about this, Kim. I agree with you. I'm always guilty about oversaturation of my photos. Thank you for your advice. Okay, cool. So next one then I'm going to move on to is I'm going to move on to Gareth, which is another one where I feel we potentially run into the same problem. As in, now, on the one hand, still life, piece of fruit, cutting board, knife, we have all the elements of a good still life. Then we've got the lemon is sliced, so that's creating an interesting effect. Now, just to say what Gareth says. Gareth says still life is one of my favourite subjects to do. And one of my favourite things to do is the falling fruit shot. Quite a bit of editing can go into this and the setting up. And absolutely, this kind of image doesn't happen easily by accident. And the thing is if you just take an ordinary lemon and you sit it on a board, it isn't going there. What you're doing to make it, you're then turning it left or right, you're moving the light, you're maybe having another lemon or a lime or an orange, or you're going citrus fruit, or whatever it is you're doing, and you're arranging things until you get the flow. This takes a huge amount of time and energy and effort to set up. However, we do potentially run into the very problem that I was just talking about, Marie's, which is that what I really think, as soon as I see this, I think of the editing. I think I get caught up in the idea that either what's happened is you've had individual pieces that have been taken and then placed together in Photoshop, or what I suspect has happened here is what Gareth has done is he has created a thread going through and then photoshopped out the thread afterwards. The giveaway for that then is in your editing, because if I come down here, what I really notice is these two little bits here, and then I notice some blurry bits around the edging here, which all have the sense of the editing where I'm using the little tool, remove tools and what have you, and I'm getting rid of some bits slightly more successfully than I'm getting rid of others. And there are various little bits and pieces around here, little blurs and bits on the editing where it kind of becomes a little bit of a giveaway. But I think, now I could be wrong, maybe those are just two little bits of lemon pith hanging down, but it looks to me like, if you like, a missed bit of editing. And because would be the way to do it, you get a piece of string, thread, needle, maybe one or two of them, and you thread it through, and you from the bottom to the top. And so if you're trying this at home, folks, use the thread, and then if you've got the editing equipment, you can remove the thread afterwards, and then you have the slices of the fruit all hanging in midair. So I get the idea. I think it's a fun idea. We've seen these kind of shots kicking about. Ever wondered how to do them? Now you've got an idea of how to. There's one way of doing them at any rate, and I think they're fun to do. Like I say, my only problem is when I see something like that, my first thought is the editing rather than necessarily getting involved in the content. Now that I have to admit, that might just be me because I'm a photographer and that's the way my mind goes. It may not be the case for plenty of other people who can just look at a photo like this and enjoy it as is. But I thought it kind of, for me, it's one of these things. It's just a little flag up there. If you disagree, that's fine. You're absolutely perfectly entitled to. I'm just kind of pointing out where my head goes. And it's a case of, like I was talking with about Marie's, it's where you place it, where you place the image. It's what the title of the contest or the challenge is. Or, the title of your exhibition if you have several pieces like this. How you display them, where you place them, what the expectations are of the people who are viewing them. And still life, less still because it looks like it's in the action of movement. But also, like I say, my first thought tends to go to the editing and why you've done that, rather than necessarily looking and being involved in the picture as the picture itself. So that's my little bits of feedback there. But yeah, no doubt, a lot of fun doing that. And for anybody who is sitting on a kind of a long, dull winter's day, not sure quite what to do, go and have a play doing this kind of thing, because I'm sure you'll get a huge amount of fun playing with it. So what have we got here? Comments. April says, this is something I could not do. Great effect. Marilyn says, wow. Viji says, how was this done? Well, I think it must have been just before I was saying how it was done. Sandra also says, interesting to know how a shot like this was created. Marie says, fishing line works great with this technique. Easy to remove in Photoshop. Susan says, another great idea, Gareth. The yellow lemon looks great against the black background. Meg says, excellent, this is fantastic. Viji goes, oh, threaded, nice idea, still beyond me. John says, might try black thread on a black background, interesting and fun idea. And Viji says, I will try this once, thank you. Okay, excellent. Right, so let's move on then. So we've had Gareth. Viji comes next then. So, okay, hold on one sec. There we go. So Viji says, last time I submitted a treasure trove, a wooden bowl of turmeric powder. I remember that one actually, Viji. Really nice and colourful, lots of beautiful texture in that. This time I wanted to try a different approach with so the cotton buds I arranged this way with the lower part held together with a rubber band and shot from the top. And I think this is a lovely photo, Viji. I really think this is a lovely photo. I've gone black and white. It fits the remit as it's a collection of objects arranged in such a way to make them compelling. And I do get drawn into it. It becomes semi-abstract. Nice shape. I like that kind of whole way that it's kind of moved, that it sort of swirls around, your eye gets drawn into it. It's very kind of graphic design, that two colours, well, black and white, monotone, and just so yeah, I think that works well. It's a good one. Compared to, because Viji had also put a couple of other pieces in, one of which where the focus wasn't working, and another one which was just a single object. And so we talked a little bit about the fact that in terms of still life of the ones that she put in, this was the one that was most kind of fitting the brief. So nice one there, Viji. And thank you for sending that one in. What have we got? April says, nice Viji. Sandra says, good use of cotton buds. Susan says, lovely Viji, it's like a flower. April's having a run. Marie says, I love the monotone photos, very nice. And Viji says, thank you everyone. Okay, on to the final image then, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do next week. And I'll also award the Smug Points for this, for today, the bonuses. I can see it's now got dull outside and I'm slowly kind of disappearing, getting darker into the screen here. Okay, so this final one then comes from Susan. So Susan says, I've chosen for the still life image the image I've chosen for the still life challenge is an image I took in July of one of my tulips. I just love how the colours of the tulip remain strong even though it's past its best and rather crispy now. I know it's fairly similar to a previous submission, but this is my favourite. Apologies for the border, it was a Camera Club entry and it won. Well, congratulations on winning for the Camera Club entry. I will just say, Susan, that you say apologies for the border, but it was... If this is sitting on your computer, you could have spent 45 seconds and removed the border before submitting it. I will just leave that there for you. Yeah, borders are one of those things where we've talked before about that notion of you are losing essentially real estate on a computer image. Something that's only ever going to be on the screen, you're better off using the maximum number of pixels available to you rather than wasting some of them by having a little border around it. It might work well on a print for when you're doing for the Camera Club. These little margins and borders sometimes work well, but wasted on a screenshot. Okay, but with this one, so but what we have now is we have the vase, we have the tulip, the dead tulip kind of curling over, we've got all the leaves turning out. This really is a beautiful, beautiful example of a really good still life. It's got the texture, it's got the flow, the composition, the light, the shadow. It kind of combines a lot of the different elements that are needed in a good still life. So yeah, I'm really impressed with this one, Susan. Congrats to you. I'm not surprised it won the Camera Club entry on that one. So thank you very much for sending that one in, Susan, border or not. Okay, so where are we? Jack says, great photo, simple. Viji says, absolutely love this. Marilyn says, lovely. Nadia says, oh wow, beautiful. Marie says, wow, wow, stunning. Kudos to you. Inge says, I really like this one. And Susan says, sorry, Kim. Sandra says, beautiful composition. Okay, excellent. Right, so thank you to everybody who sent in an image. And each of you will get 10 Smug Points for entering your image in the first place. And everybody who's turned up today, watched live, left a comment, you'll all get 5 Smug Points each. These will get added to the leaderboard. In addition, then, we have my little top 3 for the... So I had to think about this one, but the clear winner in the end was Susan. Susan will get the bonus 30 Smug Points there for her picture. Second up then is Catherine with her teapots and cookies. She gets the bonus 20 points for that. And then Inge, back in the early part with her tulips and the reflection there, Inge will get third place and the bonus 10 points. What I'll also do is, I really liked Viji's shot with the cotton buds, so Viji will get a commended bonus of 5 points for that, which I will add on. And I have to say, Jack's reflections I just love. So I'm going to give a bonus 10 points to Jack for his reflected balls with the photographer and the reflector reflected in it. I just put such a smile on my face. I think it's such an excellent piece that I couldn't let that one pass. So an extra bonus 10 points to you there, Jack. Okay, so I will add up these and add them to the leaderboard sometime during the week. I'll plonk that into Facebook, and then at the beginning of next week I will tell you where the leaderboard is sitting at. So thank you to everybody who sent something in. Next week then is going to be a feedback session. Okay, so this is your chance to get feedback on particular images. Send me your images, send me the ones that you feel you've got sticking points with, that you aren't necessarily working with, or if you've got specific questions that you would like to be answered that are photography related, let me know. So generally speaking, with the feedback sessions, I have space for roughly about 4 or so pieces which I can then kind of give in-depth feedback on. Send me the image. Now you can either email them to me, kim@kimayres.co.uk, or you can if you're on Facebook, put them into the Facebook group. If it's a photo that you've already done edits to, it's very useful if you can send me the original too. Remember, there's very few places on the internet where you can really get direct feedback on your own photography, so this is a real opportunity for you to get some. So make sure you stick your images. Try and get them to me as soon as possible. The sooner you get them to me, the more chance it gives me during the course of the week to be able to work out a response which is going to be useful to you. Final few comments. Few people. Congratulations to Susan, Catherine and Inge. Stacy says, love the podcast and all the wonderful photographs. Marie saying, well done guys and gals. Susan says she's enjoyed the podcast, looking at everybody's images, as has Inge and Jack. So yes, thank you very much to everyone for all that input, ideas and everything else. So like I say, next week, feedback session. Look forward to seeing you all then. Take care. Bye bye.